another episode of Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali. We are here with the man, the legend, and we're here to talk about a very important topic regarding the state of minorities in this country and the relationship with the state of California and the ways in which we're seeing things pan out with everything that we are experiencing. Today, attorney Zulu Ali, we are here to really try to gauge where you're at and where you're seeing the state and this relationship between people of color and the justice system. We know that California historically has been categorized as a state that is fairly progressive.
Right.
And we want to know from your experience and from where you sit, where do you see that relationship happening?
Right.
Do you see that benefiting people of color or not? And where do you see the relationship between people of color and the justice system here in California?
First of all, thank you for that great introduction. I don't think I'm deserving of it, but I appreciate that. At any rate, I think that really the way that the justice system kind of plays its way out in the state of California, especially with it being seen as a more liberal and more progressive state, I don't think it really plays itself out any much different than it does in any other state, right? Many liberal states, as well as progressive states, I guess you should say, is that there's this ideology that you can legislate, behavior, right? The real issue around the country, here in the state of California and around the country as it relates to the problems that we're having with our criminal justice system, doesn't really start in the courts. It doesn't really start with our criminal justice system at all. It actually starts with our educational system, right? And the reason why I say that is because that we tend to put, we don't really know, or at least our politicians in large numbers seem to really don't know how to deal with criminal justice. There's this idea that if there's an increase in crime, then there needs to be increase in laws as it relates to criminal behavior, and an increase in police presence, as well as an increase in sentencing. And none of that works, because as we see in this state, the crime actually increases. Like, for example, the three strikes law.
Yeah.
Although we have a three strikes law in the state of California that is supposed to actually help decreasing repeat offenders, there's no numbers change. It continues to increase. Violence intends to increase because we have not really done what we needed to do as a society, and especially the people who are representing us, to understand what needs to happen to decrease the numbers as it relates to criminal behavior. Also, oftentimes things are criminalized that aren't really technically criminal behavior, but oftentimes they're social crisis. A lot of times the best way to combat criminal behavior is education and figure out the relationship between this country and marginalized communities. We've actually went backwards in a lot of ways when it comes to the relationship between marginalized people and the country. The same numbers still exist.
Wow.
There's not been a huge difference from the numbers of African Americans when it comes to the issues of poverty and those sort of things. Now, I think that when we talk about trying to, figure out ways in which to address and deal with these issues, of course, as I've said before, I think that the result has to be some degree understanding that the state is not going to help us.
Yeah.
And I think that once we understand that the state is not going to help us, then we have to figure out ways to try to better our communities without getting the state involved. However, what we're dealing with in many of the marginalized communities is the mental trauma that much of this has been caused for centuries. So the internalized racism is a real thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Where people have basically, we've seen that, for example, with the Hispanic community and this last election.
Yeah.
You know, where they basically began to start criticizing themselves or seeing themselves through the eyes of the oppressor.
Exactly.
And then it creates it's almost like, you know, it's like a survival mode. It's like it's like being in, it's kind of funny when we think about the Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
How there's been a lot written about the Stockholm syndrome and how a hostage would ultimately begin to start acting in the interest of its oppressor and against its own personal interest. Right, because we saw that with years ago. There was a case called with Patty Hearst, who was a hostage, and then she was taken by these individuals, and ultimately they started helping her hostage takers do bank robberies, and that was just simply because of the fact that there was this, you know, Stockholm syndrome, and then there was, you know, you begin to start acting against your own interest. And the same thing has existed for the trauma that black people have suffered as an entire community. I went to the FBI hostage negotiation school back in like 1990, 1991, and we talked about, you know, we would listen to audios of people being taken hostage, like in banks and stuff. And you would hear after so long, like they would be asking for certain things. And then you would hear in the background the hostages becoming angry at the hostage negotiator. And they would say, give him what he wants. You know, like they're almost turning against the people who are trying to help them. Right? And once you've been taken a hostage, then there is a debriefing stage. A hostage needs to go through some sort of therapy and mental counseling to address that issue of being the same way with domestic violence. We understand that in domestic violence, people, you know, suffer from that same type of trauma. Yeah. You know, where they have been, you know, put in situations where they have been traumatized. It doesn't even have to be physically, it could be mentally. And then they act a certain way and they begin to turn against the people who are trying to help them, right? And the same thing happens to, you know, communities. Because you have to look at the history. The target is not an individual. The target of the American government was to dehumanize mentally and physically black people. That was the objective. It wasn't, it's not a theory. It's not a conspiracy. It is a fact that the fabric of American society, as much as the Constitution, because we say that the Constitution is a very important document, and it's at the fabric of American society. With the same type of intensity, the oppression of black people was as much the same for centuries. More time was spent trying to oppress black people than to free black people. So in other words, you have a situation where you have a system, you have a government who had an objective to, you know, enslave individuals for centuries. You could not read. That would have been against the law. You could not write. That would have been against the law. And, you know, you could not even have a family because there was no laws to protect you, to even prevent you from a mother and a father and a child to be together. Sometimes it was intentional to split them up. And the highest court of the land in a published case basically stated that a black man is not a human being, right? Yeah. So if the highest court of the land issued an opinion that says that a black person cannot be a human being, And even after the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, there was systematic oppression of black people in this country.
Yeah.
It still was an issue when it came to, you could not integrate into society, and we are to keep you separate because you were treated as a second-class citizen. So the idea of the American government to treat black people as if they're not human has been at the essence of America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when you talk about this, so we ignore that, and we don't address it. And so it's like anything else, that it's like a disease. If you do not address, if you don't try to cure the disease or treat the disease, it gets worse. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and when you're talking about it in that way, it seems like even nowadays we're not even treating symptoms right, because we think of slavery as such a far-fetched, left in the past kind of idea. But when we talk about nowadays, right, modern day slavery is being experienced through the court system, through the prison industrial complex system, through the prison and student pipeline population that we're seeing as well, and being incarcerated.
Right.
And when you're talking about the court system, as an officer of the court, right, as someone who is within the court, how do you see modern day slavery playing out in that regard?
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, I think that what happens is the agenda is still the same. People still have the same biases that they've had before. I mean, it's just like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist, so to speak, to sit in the courtroom and see that the negotiation and the way that certain people are addressed in court are different based upon how they look. I think that when they address certain individuals, that certain individuals are not given the same type of leeway, so to speak, as it relates to getting certain plea deals or certain charges or certain time. I mean, there's case after case after case, if you research it, where it talks about the fact that African Americans get more time than white people for the same type of offenses. And there is a correlation between how that plays out and the way that people are prosecuted.
Yeah.
Now, if you ask someone who's working in a police department in a city where all they see is the destructions that's going on within those communities. And again, a lot of that, I mean, I think that there has to be individual accountability. But at the same time, I think that we have to address the reasons why you're seeing those things within certain communities and you're not seeing them in other communities. Because that self-destruction is a byproduct of the internalized racism and trauma that black people have suffered, over the years. There's that, that it's there. I think that if the state is really going to be, really wants to do something that's really going to help the community, I think our educational system has to change.
Yeah.
But I think another thing that has to change, to be honest, we're going to have to figure out a way to not depend on our government to help us. But then on the other hand, and I'm talking like a lawyer, on the other hand, they won't leave us alone.
Okay.
I mean, so there's been a history of that whenever there's been black progression, which one of the examples is Black Wall Street and other similar situations where the country has actually went out and burned those cities to the ground. Whenever there's black progression, then there's always going to be white interruption. So that creates the problem. So whenever you're seeing that you have an African American who is progressing, doing well, being independent, not depending on the state as their slave master, then oftentimes they're targeted. And that target creates the trauma within black people to fear their progression and success. I'll give you an example. The reality about human beings is that every human being makes mistakes. There's no exception to that. No matter what religion you are, no matter what your thought process is, humans make mistakes.
Yeah.
If the federal government or the state government decides that you're going to be a target, they can get you for something. Nobody can go untouched. The president of the United States has 30-something felonies.
34.
Right? So everybody can be touched.
Yeah.
And so what happens, that's the problem with the criminal justice system. It can then, at a different level, be weaponized against you. Like, for example, Bill Cosby, who basically was at the top of the food chain when it came to black success, and someone who did a lot for African Americans, specifically historically black colleges and universities. And Bill Cosby became a target. His money, his success, all the positive things that he did, everything that Bill Cosby did that, in my opinion, outweighed anything that he did negatively and that he did, decades ago, was weaponized against him. Mm-hmm. And we see that with every black person who becomes successful and speaks out and becomes a vessel and a voice for oppression, they get targeted. So then what happens is that basically I can tell someone that the best way to do it is, if you happen to be an African American and you are dealing with oppression, then the best way to deal with this oppression is success. Mm-hmm. But what the same way they would hang a black man and keep him on a noose on a tree and let everybody look at it and observe it so that they know this is what happens to you when you buck the system, then the criminal justice system is being used, and it's a noose. So let's hang him so you'll understand that you need to know your place. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they put it out for public display. And it's always old news.
Yeah.
It's old news until you say and you do the wrong thing. When you say and you do the wrong thing, then they use the system to go after you to take you down. So if you have someone who happens to be a very affluent African American who is silent and does nothing really to help uplift his people in a way in which it means not necessarily being successful on the plantation, but leaving the plantation, then you become, as long as you are successful and you try to encourage people to be successful on the plantation, then there's not really any problems.
Yeah.
But if you become successful and you encourage people to leave the plantation, then you become a target and they go after you. The answer is to get off the plantation. That's the real answer, is to put yourself in a position where you've created generational wealth and you're bringing people along with you who are going to actually, your family and people could see that, and you're doing it in a way in which you want to be completely independent.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So if you're a successful African American and you partner with a predominantly white business partner, right, then you're safe. But if you say, I'm going to be successful and I'm going to make this a successful black enterprise, and I'm going to not, completely black enterprise, and I'm bringing along black people, and we're going to make black millionaires, and we're going to make a lot of money, we're going to be independent, and we're not going to need to depend on this system, and it don't make any difference because I'm going to put myself in a position where, we don't have to worry about that, right? Mm-hmm. You become a problem, and people are watching you, and people are going to come after you, and you have to walk on eggshells. Mm-hmm. That's the way America works.
Yeah.
So the reason why black people who do become successful are they walk carefully, because they're concerned that if they make the wrong decision, that they're going to come after me for something. And you cannot live comfortably in this world believing that as long as you do what is right, that nobody's going to come after you, because that's not reality. They can come after you for anything, to the extent where, we do know, people have been set up. Or they'll find someone to try to set you up. Or they'll find your weaknesses and set you up. And then you have to deal with the external mindset of those outside of your community.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult, because you're dealing with European colonialism both inside your community with your own people and outside of your community. And that's very difficult, and that's why, clearly we have people who call themselves Pan-Africanists, and they want to do things for people. They make YouTube videos, they do all these things and talk about the white man, but they're not really, they don't have that kind of clout or power. But then, can you imagine Bill Cosby telling black people that you need to, get off the plantation? And I'm getting ready to buy a network, and we're getting ready to do some things. The same thing. This is similarly with, we see what happened with Deion Sanders and his kids. They did not like Deion Sanders because Deion Sanders was a confident person who, number one, he's a black man who, the stereotype black men don't take care of their children. His two young sons who he wanted to do what he could to make them successful. He does a great job, I think, as a coach. I think he basically raised two great young men who basically, they made mistakes, obviously, but, I'm sure they did. I don't know their mistakes, but they're humans. I'm sure they have and will. But I think in the grand scheme of things, he did a great job, and we expected to see great things at the next level.
Yeah.
And he was very confident as a black man, unapologetically a man who happens to be black. He has two young men who were confident. You have Shadur Sanders, who happens to be, and I'm just using this because I think this actually tells you the mindset that was used in the NFL to blackball his kids and him is the same mindset that goes on in the criminal justice system.
Yeah. So
basically, a son who should have been at least a first-round pick gets picked in the second round. The fifth round.
Yeah.
Right? 144 overall. He's probably at least the best one or two quarterback. And then he has another one, Shiloh, who doesn't get drafted at all. Then it's clear that the reason why that happened, just like them blackballing Colin Kaepernick, which is a little bit different, but still the same grand scheme of things. You black, you don't need to speak up for yourself. Right? That's a problem. You need to play your role because this is the plantation. Then you have Shiloh, who just got waived by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if you see the clip, there is this tight end who is pushing him after the whistle is blown, pushing him. And then he swung back. And he got waived. He got ejected out of the game and waived. And the white guy stayed in the game.
Of course.
Right? That is classically how it works.
Yeah.
Right? The white guy pushes you, and when you push back, then you get ejected.
Yeah, it's almost like you're in an abusive relationship, right? The person focuses on your reaction. In this case, people of color, right? Sometimes there's reactions that they deem as the sole non-issue, when what triggered that reaction is not necessarily focused on.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing in the relationship between the state and people of color, right? That there's a really unhealthy relationship happening where there's different layers of oppression, different layers of actions and things that are being done against people of color that really, what is the reaction? What are we expected to do?
Right.
What is the solution?
Yeah. So you have to be as you know. It's like, you know, someone pushes you, and you say, that's the perfect example that we cannot react the same way they react on the plantation, right? Because you know, it's their plantation.
Yeah.
And so what we've learned is that, you know, it's much bigger than, I mean, I know poverty, we talked about poverty, and clearly there are white people who are poor who aren't treated properly as well in many different cases.
Yeah.
However, I think it manifests itself a little bit differently than it does with African Americans.
Yes.
Poor white people are pawns. Poor white people are, they're kind of like used as overseers. Right? They have no money. They just happen to be on the plantation, but basically they sometimes are seen basically as overseers. And sometimes when the overseer does something wrong, they're probably going to be treated a little bit different than the person who owns the plantation. You know what I mean? So oftentimes they are put in situations where they are the byproduct of the injustice. But I think that, you know, when we, you know, and it really is what it, I mean, you know, then we have, you know, people who are suffering from the trauma and internalized racism that are doing the same things to other black people. Let me give you an example. Let's say that, and I'm doing generalities here. I'm not saying this applies to everybody, but let's just say there's a judge. And let's just say that you happen to be a black prosecutor, or you happen to be a black attorney or a defense attorney, and you're in court. Now, a black judge may treat you differently because they do not want to be perceived as favoring black people or favoring somebody who happens to be black. And they're overcompensating because they're put in a position and they realize that the consequences of being a black judge or being a black prosecutor is going to be different than their white counterparts. So they feel like, look, I'm not going to let you come in here and mess up my position, because Massa's a good Massa, right? And I'm not going to let that good Massa do something that's going to allow me to get kicked out of the house. If I'm in the house, do you think I'm going to let somebody in the slave I'm not going to sleep on the floor in a shack because of you, and I'm sleeping in the house in a bed. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the way sometimes that we deal with each other.
Yeah.
And when we're in those spaces, because they treat us differently. So you want to belong. So if I'm a police officer and I'm around my peers and they're checking your oil, they want to know what type of black person are you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you a field Negro or are you a house Negro? And how one of the way you are is how I'm going to treat you. Now, if you're a field Negro and you're a police officer, then I'm going to look at your reports differently.
Yeah.
I'm going to look at how you respond differently. I'm going to make you ultimately think that something is wrong with you. Right? And you can make that happen. So I'm going to act a certain way, because if I go out here and, if I go out here as I want to become chief of police, I want to become a captain, I want to become a lieutenant, I want to become a sergeant. I want to become a detective. And I realize that how they perceive me has an impact on how I'm going to move up the ranks. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say I go out here and I tell them that, if I walk into the circle and I tell them, you know what, I like Trump. I think Trump is doing some really good things. And, I don't think it's about black and white. I think it's about right and wrong. And I think that, they need to get it. It's just like whatever. I'm going to be treated. They're going to allow me into spaces that you wouldn't otherwise allow me. Now, if I walked up there and said, I think Trump, I think he's destroying. I think he's inhumane. I think this is, there's racism in the street. There's racism in the department. I think we need to do some things to improve. Mm-hmm. Then they're going to treat you differently. Yeah. Because, they feel uncomfortable. You make people feel uncomfortable when you talk like that.
Of course.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's why there is no progression.
Yeah.
Because there has to be a correlation of two. Success and being woke and trying to do something to benefit your people, right? Mm-hmm. And bringing people along with you in that progress, telling the truth. Those are very dangerous things. Mm-hmm. And they see you as a threat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So, and that's the issue that we're dealing with in our society is, we're going to be a target. So this is the thing, is like putting us in spaces. It's like I can easily say, well, it's not racism anymore because you got Oprah, you got all these very successful African American men and women doing great things. They're in Congress, they're in Senate, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're PhDs, they're very successful people. They're going to college. You see them every day. Then where is the racism at? Nobody's coming out and dragging you out of the house and hanging you, right? Are there individual success stories? Of course they are.
Yeah.
But, what about the village? You see what I mean? So that's the problem. Yeah. And so the problem, of course, is that we don't have people who are able to correlate success both with the village and with themselves. Like, I'm going to use this as a tool and a resource to bring people along with me. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that becomes look at some of these people who you got people who have $50 million, $1 billion, and you're African American, and you're scared to say something that would blackball you. Now, how rich are you? If you got $1 billion and you cannot get up there and talk about the oppression and how we need to go into our communities and change the situation, right? Then, like if I have if we call a billionaire to sit down and talk about the oppression of black people and how we can figure out a way to basically own, become independent and own our own stuff, there's consequences to that. Now, if I ask them to come over here and say, hey, talk to me about this new film that you got and how do you think it, then, there's a problem. They're not going to come because they're going to be cut off. They may not allow me, I might be blackballed in my industry. I might lose my job. And in some cases, they might put me in prison.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason that Bill Cosby should have went to prison. Absolutely no reason. Now, what I can say is this, the hypocrisy of America as it relates to forgiveness and redemption is absolutely terrible. in the worst way. America, the only way you can love America is have a spirit of redemption and forgiveness. A black man in America or a black woman in America has every reason to hate America. Every reason to hate this country in the worst way. But we end up being the most patriotic people.
Yeah.
Right? America has never apologized for what it's done. It's never asked for redemption for what it's done. And in many ways, continue to say people should be held accountable for what they do. But America has never been held accountable for what it's done.
Yeah.
If America did not have the most powerful military force in the world, it should go to the International Criminal Court and be held liable for genocide, like some of these other people. There's nothing. All right, let's talk about Saddam Hussein taking people out and executing them for no reason at all. America did that to black people. Yeah. Right? I mean, you could go to a black man's home where he's doing nothing but taking care of his wife and his children. A black man goes home. A group of white men could walk into your home, say your son looked at a white woman, snatch him up, take him away, and as a black man, there's nothing you could do about it. And that went on for centuries. For centuries. Right?
Yeah.
But then, if a black man goes to a home and snatches a kid out of the home and kill him, they're going to say he's a monster. He should go to prison for the rest of his life. And that was a systematic process in America. And they still do it, but in a different way.
Yeah.
They were killing our kids, for nothing. And in many ways, killing them unjustly, at the very least. And now, we want to know how they, like they make you feel like you're stupid, like you can't articulate. Well, you can't articulate it because you can't speak truth.
Yeah.
If I stand in front of a group of people and I'm trying to make them understand what's going on, and I say, well, America's racist, they did this in the past, they did that in the past, it doesn't touch them.
Yeah.
It doesn't touch them. This is a strong word, but the devil is a hell of a thing. The devil is a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
And there's no scholarship, there's no degree, there's nothing that you can teach someone to let them understand the importance of our Creator and those who hate our Creator. And I'm definitely 110% convinced that the devil is very active in America right now.
Yeah.
In the same way that he was in the 17th century, the 18th century, and the 19th century. The same way that we normalized the actions of our government and the actions of people in our society was normal then. It was, we look back now and realize, some people do, how terrible it was.
Yeah.
We'll look back another 100 years, if God gives us that long, and we'll say how terrible that was.
Yeah.
That they were doing that to people.
Exactly.
And the fact that nobody can, I could just say in my practice and as an attorney, I represent people of all colors with the same intensity that I represent anybody else. The reason why I do that is because my heart won't allow me to do anything different. You think about these militias and these individuals that go out and try to overthrow the government and just, lose their mind. why didn't black people do that? I just don't think it was in our spirit. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people who are oppressed in their spirit.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. That's what I think.
And I think we've definitely believed the lie, you know, of who we are mm-hmm. and what we stand for, but also see the repercussions that might come mm-hmm. from any sort of reaction. Mm-hmm. And I think that where we're at, it seems like what you're saying is we can't really legislate the condition of the heart. Mm-mm. We can't really legislate our way to being seen as decent human beings. Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest problem when you go into these spaces, you know, in whether you're talking about, you know, they spend so much time debating over the basic human rights mm-hmm. issues. And we also are and that's another thing, is that we've become, you know, whenever we put people in these spaces in our communities, whether it's, you know, she's the first Mexican X, Y, and Z, or he's the first African American, whatever, then you have people, well, what is he doing for black people? You know, some of these people making those comments aren't doing anything either. And they're doing, sometimes they're doing as much as they feel like they can without losing their positions. It's like those two black legislators in Tennessee. When they were suspended, there was 3 people that did something. They suspended the 2 black men, and then the white lady was not suspended. Mm-hmm. And they did the same thing. So when you see this over and over and over again, you know, you begin to start like using your common sense and realize that really what's going on is what's at the fact. Is America going to change? Mm. You know what I mean? So America is somebody is you know, it's like being in a bad, we're married to an abusive spouse. Mm-hmm. And America is an abusive spouse. And we are trying to figure out whether they're going to change or not. You know, mm-hmm. And then what do we do? So when when a person's in an abusive relationship, you know, they have nowhere to go. Like, what are you going to do? Either I play this game out and get along, or I have nowhere to go. My whole survival, my whole being is based upon this person that I'm married to. Mm-hmm. And then if I leave this person, then, you know, how do I survive? How do I take care of my children? Yeah. How do I take care of myself? You know, how am I going to look? How is this going to, you know what I mean? So and that's the marriage between Black America and between Black Americans and our government in America. Yeah. You know, like, what are your choices? It's like you ain't got no choice but to like me.
Or make excuses for the behavior. Right. And internalize it.
Exactly.
It's okay.
And then if you speak up and you know, well, look, do you want to get slapped again? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Because I'll slap you. Or, you know, I can say it, but I know that when I say it, that we're going to get in a fight and I'm going to get my nose broke, mm-hmm. or I'm going to get a black eye, or I'm going to get beat up, I'm going to get pushed, I'm going to get punished. Something's going to happen to me. Mm-hmm. So how do I deal with that? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the actors within the criminal justice system act that way. Yeah. So you can't, it's built that way. When you stand in front of the judge, you have to stand there and you got to act a certain way. You can't put your hands in your pocket. You can't roll your eyes. Mm-hmm. You can't look around. You have to stay there and talk to the person who is overcompensating for their shortcomings, mm-hmm. and using it against you. Yeah, definitely. Because there's certain things that I would never say to a person. If I'm speaking to someone and, you know, unless you are being abusive to me, if you're standing there and I don't like the way you're acting, there's a limit as to what I'm going to say to you. Because if I'm really the judge and I really got the power, I don't need to say that. But I'm saying it because it's not like you're disrespecting the bench. You're just I need your respect. Yeah, you're projecting something. Same way when you're talking about a prosecutor. Same way you're talking about a police officer with a gun. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between a security guard without a gun and a police officer with a gun? His authority. He thinks he's better than you because he has the right to enforce the rules of the state with a gun and a badge. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And so just like Eddie Murphy said in 48 Hours, I'm your worst nightmare. I'm an N with a badge and I got a permission to kick your ass anytime I feel like it. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the authority. You know what I mean? And imposing your authority on... Authority means nothing if you can't impose it on nobody.
True.
So how do you flex? And that's what happens. That's what you're dealing with is people, you know, who are flexing. Just like when you put somebody on the plantation and he lives in the house. Living in the house means nothing unless you can look at the people who live in the field. $1 million mean nothing unless if everybody else had $1 million. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, and that's kind of what's happening with the same way with the Hispanic community.
Yeah.
If you have someone who, you know, finally gets on and they're treated like, you know, like they're not really, you know what I mean? And then they're put in spaces and they want to know, why can't you get your papers? Why can't you come over there without being inspected? We came over here the right way, right?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, don't talk to me. I mean, I had a guy, I was in AutoZone. When a guy walked up to a guy and was speaking to him in Spanish, and he basically admonished him for speaking to him in Spanish. You know, I mean, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, or people who speak Spanish who refuse to speak it and they act like they don't know how to speak it when, like they come to you, like they come to work for you. Like, do you know how to speak Spanish? No, I don't know how to speak Spanish. Then they go back in the back and they talk in Spanish to their mom. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, it's like when you get in space, in these particular spaces, you know, you want to feel privileged and you don't want to feel like those people because you begin to look down on people who are like you, right? And they remind you of that. Yeah. It's like I hate the way they treated me so bad that I hate you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And that's a common situation.
Yeah,
you know,
they
with
project
people.
Insecurity through arrogance
right.
or denial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm not like you. It's just like, you know, and you know, there's actually I've heard people say that tell black people, well, you know, you're not like them. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it makes you feel better. You're not like them kind of, you know, you're not like the lower class blacks. You're not the higher class blacks, right? Mm-hmm. I know that we've had a lot of on Carnival cruises. Have you seen where they've been very critical of the black ghetto behavior?
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Oh so, my gosh,
you know, that's another story, but.
You know, we've been talking about all of these issues here in this country, and just wanting to ask you, you know, what are the additional solutions that you see for us as minorities and people of color to really have agency?
I think that the primary solution that I have is, our additional solution is, again, we talked about the fact that we have to, you know, begin to start getting off the plantation. Mm-hmm. And I think that but I want to be clear about getting off the plantation. Now, getting off the plantation does not include black people who aren't doing anything and are criticizing people who are in the house, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is that the reason why some black people won't come out of the house is when the heat is on, the people who are in the field don't help. So criticizing the guy in the house doesn't help if the people in the field aren't going to come to his aid and help him. And that's the problem, is that when we see, that's the other side of it, when we see these individuals who come out and try to assist or try to do something to help people, then where's everybody at? The same people that criticized the person when he was in the house are going to make light of the fact and criticize them when they get kicked out of the house. Like, I see, you know, you see what I'm saying? So a lot of people, it's like you're on an island by yourself. Everybody wants you to carry them on their back. All the slaves want you to carry them on their back, but they don't want to help you. If I'm going to have a slave rebellion and it's just me and two people, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to take Master's gun and have a rebellion, maybe that's not a good analogy. But if I'm going to have a rebellion and I come out of the house, then we all need to be in this together. And that's the problem. I think that there's the mindset that, okay, they're going to do something against me, but are my people going to follow me when I move?
Exactly.
And oftentimes the people who are in the field aren't going to help you in the process. And that is another issue. I think that, everybody's going to have to stand up, and just because you're in the field don't mean you're going to help. Right? So if I'm in a house and I'm deciding I'm going to give this up for you and you, then what you going to do? It's not what am I going to do in the house.
Yeah.
It's what you going to do to help me if I get in the house.
Yeah.
The same thing with Barack Obama. See, Barack Obama didn't do nothing for black people. Well, if Barack Obama would have done more for black people, are those same black people going to ride with him if something happens? Because they were going to get him.
Yeah.
Right? If Barack Obama, as the president of the United States, would have did anything that, and they went after him for everything he did, and his family. If he did any of the stuff that Trump did, he would have never survived one term.
Oh yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, that's the issue. He might not. What did he do? What did he do for black people? The question is, what did you do? That's the question. If I'm sitting here on my couch and I get up every day and go to work, I know you got a job. You're talking a lot of stuff, right? What did you do when you went to IBM that day? You didn't do anything. It starts with you. What are you doing? I ain't going to vote. Did you give $1 to his campaign? Did you give $2 to his campaign? Did you go to his rally?
Exactly.
Did you go and write your comments? Did you go out and do anything other than just talk? No, you didn't do anything. So that is the issue, is that we want to sit back and sit on the couch and complain about the man and complain about the people in the house, but we aren't really going out. Did you get up today? If there's a rally, are you going to go to it? Well, they don't do nothing. Rallies don't do anything. Nothing, there's nothing does nothing. So the answer is get up and become part of that. Make the difference and help make the change. And, you have to, there's fear there. But you cannot expect everybody to give up their life and give up what they work for when you're not willing to do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's what I'm saying, is that basically just because you're in the field don't mean you can't do anything. Go out and help them. You're going to be a target too, but why would you be reluctant to give up your position and you want that person to give up their position? And that's where the stalemate is. Like, if I'm sitting on the bench. If I get up here and go on television and say that the system is racist, I'm going to get suspended. I'm going to get in trouble. They're going to come after me. But what are you going to do? Like Judge Olu Stevens in Missouri, who brought out the fact that there was racism in the jury system, and he got suspended. Nobody even know who he is. But what if he just didn't say anything? He wouldn't have got suspended. But he said something, he got suspended, and then nobody went on the courthouse steps and said, give that man his job back. I'm with you. I'm going to make sure you get back in office. Or go vote. If Obama would have done something and they went after him, those same people that criticized him would have condemned him for doing whatever they said he did wrong. I'm not here one way or the other. I'm just being objective about, I believe, Obama's administration. Could Obama did more? He could have did more for in many different ways. But the question is, there's certain things you have to understand about the presidency. You can't do everything sometimes that people think you can do.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not like you're the president and everything. Of course, we got a president now that obviously can do whatever he wants to.
Of course.
But a black president couldn't do that. When you put in certain spaces, then you have to act a certain way. You cannot act like Trump. because Trump is the epitome of, if you want to say that basically you can get away with anything, you can get away with anything. You can commit 34 felonies and he still ain't got sentenced yet.
White privilege.
Right? You can violate all kinds of laws, take away people's rights, ignore the court rulings, say whatever you want to say, and there's no repercussions for it. And they like it because they know because they think that's the way it's supposed to be in this country. I think social marketing would help, meaning that I believe that there should be campaigns that address that psychosis and trauma. And I think that whenever we, social marketing, and nowadays we live in, social media and internet and whatever. So when there should be public service announcements about these issues and what you need to do and the fact that you're suffering from it. Like they have these commercials where it said, are you suffering from sleepless nights? Or, you know what I mean? I'm telling you, it is a thing.
Yeah.
Internalized racism is a thing.
Yeah.
And it is one of the biggest problems that we have as African Americans and other minority and marginalized people.
Yeah.
Is they have internalized this racism and they begin to start acting against their interest. Right?
Yes.
The same way that, we give people a pass when they get kidnapped. And then they begin to start acting a certain way. It's because there is a proven psychosis to people when they're being oppressed. The same way when you say, well, why can't they just walk away from this abusive relationship? You should just leave. That's not your fault. Take responsibility. Right?
Yeah. It's easier to say it from the outside.
Exactly.
Right?
People don't want to empathize with the fact, but when you're in a situation like that, there's even men that stay in relationships that are being abused, because it may not be necessarily physical, but there's other ways in our education system.
Definitely.
We have to begin to start educating people in that, understanding that this is more of an issue of their shortcoming than it is of yours. You're being targeted for a reason. Have to learn how to deal. The way we had to learn how to navigate the plantation in the 17th and 18th century, we have to learn how to navigate the plantation of today.
Well, thank you for that very important reminder, Attorney Zulu Ali, of just knowing that the relationship between the justice system and this system overall and people of color and minorities and people living in undermined communities is an unhealthy one, and that the future really depends on us and the agency we really attribute to our own selves. So with that, thank you so much for all of you that are tuning in, for watching this episode, and stay tuned with more information about Attorney Zulu Ali, what he's out there doing in the world, all the change that he's creating. There's a Stop and Frisk Academy. There's the Justice Watch Radio. Stay tuned for more. Thank you for tuning in today.
All right, thank you.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia.